Okay, thank you for joining us. This is MedHeads at MedCity News, hosted by Stephanie Baum. I'm the digital health editor at MedCity News, and I'm joined by my two colleagues on either side of the country, Meghna Keshavan in San Diego, and hello, Meghna.
Hello.
And Neil Vercel, our health technology reporter in Chicago. Hello, Neil.
Hi, Stephanie. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm great. And how's the weather in both of your respective climes?
Don't even go there.
No?
It's been raining all day.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty overcast for me also. It's not 72 and sunny right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I won't wander into that. I mean, it's pretty. Philadelphia is pretty typical. Hot, humid, high 90s, mid to high 90s. It's
Wow.
insufferably hot.
Mm.
Okay, so today on today's MedHeads, we are going to be straddling the worlds of health technology and biotech, because this week in particular, it seems like each of these sectors is going through kind of a critical moment. In the case of biotech, Meghna has been covering a conference in Houston, the
redefining early stage investments conference. Yes.
Thank you, Meghna.
Right.
And Resi for short. And Neil has been, and also, I'm sorry. So there were some interesting findings from that, but also we did a story this week about the really kind of massive IPO that happened of Accident Sciences, and it seems to reflect this kind of interesting moment in the biotech world. It's basically it has a phase 3 Alzheimer's disease drug in phase 3 development, excuse me. But so that's on the one hand that people are pretty excited about that, but on the other hand, there is a lot of concern that because of the size of this IPO, that it reflects a big bubble. So, and on the counter side to that, in healthcare technology, we've had kind of an interesting week on Capitol Hill with the release of a report by the Government Accountability Office focusing on the, I think it's the lack of the, it was sort of an audit of health technology spending by the federal government. Excuse me. And there was a lot of, it highlighted some concerns about the risky oversight of health IT investments on the one hand, but also in the realm of health IT, there was a hearing on Capitol Hill talking about some of the concerns about interoperability of electronic health records in the Department of Defense and that sort of thing. So, Neil, would you like to start us off?
Well, okay. There are two things that happened this week. One, before the House, the director of IT management for the GAO delivered a report to two House subcommittees that looked at the entire federal government's IT infrastructure, which is an $80 billion a year enterprise, not just IT, but the entire IT shop for the entire federal government. They did get at two particular things in health IT, and number one is the lack of interoperability between the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is, of course, nothing new. But I think there's just a lot of people getting real antsy about the slow pace of everything. You know, they said in 2.5 years ago, almost February 2013, the secretaries of the two departments, and this was the previous VA secretary. As you know, we had the scandal with the patient with patient registration last year. that caused Eric Shinseki to resign, among other things. But and that is one thing that came up there, is the fact that the VA has been unable to put together an online registration system. It's still pretty much done on paper these days. It's still pretty much done on paper, which is really remarkably primitive for a system that had one of the most advanced EHR implementations in the world. Now, of course, they're in process of bidding a replacement system, probably from the commercial sector, for Vista, for the VA's homegrown EHR that served so well over 25, probably 30 years or more. But again, it is 30 years old, and it's not interoperable at all with the Department of Defense's, the military health systems EHR. So when somebody comes out of the military, retires from the military and transitions into the VA's health system, their records often don't get transferred electronically. So, and for the amount of money that's been spent, people expect better. Now the other, go ahead. You had a question.
No, I mean it seems like the government in some ways, when it comes to being able to manage the I mean they have these aspirations that they've mapped out for everybody. It seems kind of hollow in some ways that they're not able to fulfill the expectations they have for sort of the non-governmental health systems.
Exactly, and that's what the subject of the Senate hearing before the HELP committee, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, I believe is what it stands for, which is not the first time. I believe it's the second hearing that the committee has had in the last month or so, where they've, particularly Republican leadership in the Senate, is really wanting to see value for the now almost $30 billion that's been spent on meaningful use to pay for these records in the private sector that are not interoperable and that aren't at this point improving care and saving money the way that a lot of policymakers had hoped. Now, the original intent of meaningful use was for stage one to be get all the systems in, and that happened. That part was successful. Stage two, where we're in right now, was about achieving interoperability, and we seem a long way off from that, and the timeline's been pushed back several times as to where these stages were going to be. And now stage three, which is in the proposal, in the proposal form right now, and probably will be finalized by the end of the year, is supposed to build the interoperable, or to build what's called the learning health system toward the triple aim of better care, improved population health, and lower costs. Now, I can see why people in Congress, and it may be for political reasons, or it may be just they're antsy about the slow pace of things getting done, but and I think it's bipartisan. It's bipartisan because ONC, which of course is part of the Obama administration, put out that report a few months ago talking about information blocking, and I think the hearing before the Senate this week did address information blocking, and I know that Neil Patterson of Cerner was asked some pretty tough questions about why his and their competitor systems don't interoperate as well as they should.
Interoperate?
That is a very hard word to get down.
Yes.
It's almost as difficult to say as to execute. I mean, do you think that things are going to get better from here? I mean, it seems like we're at a fork in the road in some ways.
We are at a fork in the road, and I think right now, with CMS revising both the Stage 2 regulations and getting ready to finalize the Stage 3 regulations, now would be the time for CMS to say you are going to use these standards. But on the other hand, they may not want to. They may not want to, rule with such a heavy hand, in one sense. But on the other hand, people on both sides of the aisle are getting impatient and want a return for all this money that's spent. And you know, is the money, and oh, by the way, the VA contract is probably going to end up going to either Epic or Cerner, more likely Epic from what I've heard. But if everybody in Washington is upset at these two large vendors for not playing nicely in the sandbox, you know, why would they award the contract, and why wouldn't they rebid it? I don't know if that's going to happen, but you know, the VA is about to drop. I think I heard somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 billion. That may be wrong, but it's a lot of money that's going to be spent on the same technology that's not interoperating in the private sector.
Sure. Okay, well, we're going to go from one fork in the road in the health IT sector to another fork in the road in the biotech sector. I mean, Megha, you were at Resi earlier this week. You produced some really interesting stories, particularly one that looked at how the investment, how the pattern of investment in biotech has shifted. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the not so distant past, there was a very, very set way that, you know, a startup was able to launch, like in the very, very early stages. Angels and family and friends, like that's how you got your early money, and then you did a little bit of preclinical work and attracted the venture capitalists who then would fund you probably phase 1, phase 2, even phase 3. You know, you could get corporates or private equity or foundations kind of involved in the later stage clinical trials, and then, you know, you exit right around when you're ready to go to market, or you get acquired. Like, there's just that's what it used to be. And then nowadays, like, I think that the funding model has just been turned on its head, and that was one of the you know, prevailing topics at the Resi conference, because, you know, it's redefining early stage investment. And you know, I was very much noticing that, A, the corporates are there from the very beginning. They are looking at early stage research. They're partnering out with, you know, universities and things like that. Actually, this is just, you know, cocktail conversation, but it was really interesting to hear about some of the opinions on tech transfer these days. People are more interested in going to the source. You know, like all kinds of investors. It's the, you know, venture philanthropists, foundations, large pharma. They want to go straight to the source, and there's a little bit of a issue with tech transfer, actually. But anyway, you know, the funding model is just changing. So, you know,
I'm going to ask you about the issue in tech transfer, because, like, hasn't the stereotype been that universities have been really not very effective at being able to commercialize their technology? But, you know, there have been kind of movements to improve that, and there's been more collaboration, it seems like, from what I've seen, with the venture capital sector, or the venture capital segment of investing. What's your take on that, or is that, were you speaking about a different issue?
No, I mean, it's really interesting because, like, everyone is understanding that there's a lot of stuff sitting on the bench that is not making it to the bedside. You know, and I think the flaws can. I mean, this problem is sort of prevalent across the board. I mean, yeah, there is issue with tech transfer offices not being effective enough, or, you know, maybe taking too much in licensing for a startup to, like, you know, really make it lucrative to launch new technology. That's kind of a criticism, but, you know, you can look at this crazy IPO this week. The $2 billion valuation on this thing? Yeah, Activant. It was funny when you said it just earlier in the conversation, you pronounced it like accident technologies, which I thought it was kind of funny, because I was like, is it an accident that the valuation is this high? Like, really? What's because the reason I'm connecting it is that you know, they for $5 million they took something that was sitting on a shelf gathering dust, like a
GlaxoSmithKline, right?
Yeah, they were, you know, GSK had dropped an Alzheimer's asset, and, like, you know, this, like, basically Wall Streeter, like, just picks up an asset, you know, works with a hedge fund and gets this valuation, like, within no time, up to $2 billion. It's crazy. I may have diverged from my point just a little bit, but
I want to know how I can get in on that kind of action, though.
Yeah, he's received some criticism for it, hasn't he? I mean, yeah. hasn't there been a certain amount of, like, because his it's, for one thing, it's an offshore It's based in Bermuda, and some family members are on the management team or something.
Yeah, it's just
And yet it's a phase 3, an Alzheimer's disease drug in phase 3 development. We should be like clapping our hands and dancing around, shouldn't we?
Well, it's just crazy because like so many venture capitalists these days are doing exactly this. You know, they are taking these like discarded assets because it's kind of easier if they've already gotten, you know, early stage clinical validation. They're safe, you know, and then they can try and spin it into something that's effective for another indication. But this is straight up indication of the fact that we are in a biotech bubble. I mean, I'm gonna say that like that valuation is wild. Like we are way way over our heads. Like John Carroll over at Fierce, just, you know, he kind of lambasted the whole thing in a pretty funny way. Honestly, it's worth reading. Calls it like, you know, they bought it for lunch money. He said, which I love that. Stephanie and I were talking about that, like lunch money. It's great.
That's a great quote.
Yeah, like, but. You know, one of the shows that I really like watching is Silicon Valley, and they talk about valuations all the time. And at this Resi conference, they're talking about valuations too, and how, you know, we're getting these inflated valuations. What kind of legit payoff is going to be coming out of these things? Like, biotech is real these days, but I think we're approaching some sort of crazy inflection point where people are going to have to show whether they're going to be able to make something of these insane valuations.
I mean, it's not like the biotech industry is alone for getting lambasted for insane valuations. I mean, the technology industry certainly, but I mean, increasingly healthcare technology companies, as they approach the market, I mean, a couple have already filed IPOs. A couple have gone live already. I mean, Evolent has gone live, but so far they haven't done.
Yeah, and Evolent priced it above their stated range actually, and then it jumped 11% the first day.
Sure. So, and yet it hasn't made a profit yet. So.
Right.
Yeah. And it's also interesting, just because another one of the prevailing trends at Resi was that, you know, this conference it had panels with all sorts of types of early stage investors, like venture capitalists and angels and foundations and all these things. And one of the things that they all talked about was that none of them wanted to actually lead around. They didn't want to grab like control over an early stage asset. But then you look at like a hedge fund, like with this accident therapeutics, you know, and they. You know, they took the lead with a $5 million compound and are spinning it around so quickly. So there's value in taking leadership. It's interesting that people aren't and they're risk averse. Like there's just a lot of interesting change swimming around in the way that investment is going these days in the life sciences space, I think.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, next week we've got bio, so but we'll get back to that in a second. I mean, well, actually, why don't we just, while we're on that subject, is there anything that you're particularly looking forward to with the conference coming up next week? The International Bio Conference.
I'm looking forward to watching Boyz II Men perform.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Boyz II Men was the first concert I ever saw as a kid, so you know, it's like a full circle situation.
And they're coming to, well, it's in their hometown.
Yeah, they are Motown Philly. I'm looking forward to them performing that at Bio in Philadelphia. No, but I mean, I think that the agenda looks pretty good. There are going to be some pretty hot panels. I'm excited to see Eric Topol talk. Stephanie and I are going to have a one-on-one, or two-on-one, I suppose, conversation with Eric Topol. And so I plan to chat with him about some of his thoughts on precision medicine. What are your thoughts on, you know, what, because he's going to keynote Bio. So
you're going to be blown away if you've never heard him speak before. You're going to be blown away.
I believe it. It's crazy. I haven't seen him keynote. I've seen him speak on a panel before.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Because I've seen him keynote, but I've never sort of actually had a close encounter with him. So it'll be interesting. So looking beyond that, I mean, obviously, the stories that we focused on so far weren't the only stories you guys were writing this week. Were there any in particular? Were there any other stories that you thought you were particularly excited about, or thought were particularly interesting that you did, or that your colleagues did?
I'll let you start with that, Neil.
Okay, yeah, there are two that come to mind. One from just this morning, Judy Faulkner from Epic pledged, took the Warren Buffett, Bill Gates giving pledge which they've asked all the world's billionaires to do, and I think something like only 7 to 8% have said so far that they would. But she has pledged to give away 99% of her fortune, which I think Forbes estimated as something like $2.7 billion, to give all that away to philanthropic pursuits of unspecified philanthropic pursuits. But the letter that she wrote accompanying it was pretty fascinating. I noticed in scanning the list of people who had taken the pledge, Patrick Soon-Shiong is on that list. But I couldn't see some others. None other caught my eye as far as being in healthcare. I think there may have been some biotech people in there. I think Craig Venter may be on that list, but don't quote me on that. But I'm wondering now, with Judy doing this, if anybody from Cerner, like say Neil Patterson, who probably is worth almost as much as she is going to do something like that.
Worth watching.
Yeah, definitely worth watching.
That is something, though, to give away 99% of your estate. I just I can't quite envision that.
And she's already said that when she retires or dies, the assets of Epic are going to be placed into a trust. So they're going to say, she set the rules, and she has pretty strict rules about how. I mean, it's a very closely held company. Karl Dvorak has some shares, of course, as well, but I don't know who the other investors are. But also, every employee around the world must be based in Verona, Wisconsin, outside of Madison. They have no branch offices. They don't even have any overseas programmers or anything like that. So they've been doing things a little differently from everyone else and doing it successfully. In some ways, it's almost like the Southwest Airlines philosophy, where they do everything opposite of everyone else and do it very successfully. And then the other interesting thing that I wanted to highlight was an experiment that Mayo Clinic did this week in social media, in that they broadcast something on Periscope, which, if you're not familiar with, is an app that actually Twitter bought earlier this year for a lot of money. I think it was upwards of $1 billion. It allows you to stream live video from your phone to anybody who clicks on a link that appears in your Twitter streams. There are a couple other apps like that. Meerkat is the other one, the other big one out there so far that I've actually seen people use to bootleg parts of concerts to broadcast concerts live.
So how did it go then?
So it went. They had a little bit of a glitch. Their social media manager sent the tweet with the link from his personal account rather than Mayo's account. And in fact, he commented on the story. He said, "Thanks for highlighting this. We hope to keep experimenting, and they are going to Periscope portions of Mayo's social media summit next week as well." But he said that he has 14,000 followers. Mayo has almost 1.2 million followers. So obviously,
the difference.
Yeah, a little bit of a difference. And I think any of us would die to have 14,000 followers right now. Although I have to say the 6,500 that I have is more than Susie Essman, which I found when I checked her Twitter after Nicole wrote that story about about Sir Tim Hunt's noble comment. No, it was when Susie Essman was on the nightly show this week talking about female Viagra. But I think that other one about Tim Hunt is fascinating too. And all I got to say to anybody who responded is, "You go, girls." I think it was really a wonderful response, and I'm kind of glad that he got knocked down into his place.
I'm just happy I got to hear Neil say, "You go, girls."
Surely that's worth waiting for on any MedHeads. Well, dialing it back a bit to the Mayo Clinic, I can certainly empathize with video glitches.
Yes.
I have video.
I liked when your whole face was green for the entire MedHeads. That was good.
Which one was that?
But Periscope's got some limitations. For example, your phone has to be held vertically, so it can only be shown in portrait mode. And they tried to squeeze two people into this really narrow frame, which was actually kind of funny. You can if you turn it sideways, the picture will actually appear sideways. If you watch it on either, or I guess you could, watch it on your phone sideways without, the screen rotation on. But if you watch it, and you can watch it through a web browser too, in which case the picture would be sideways. So
sounds complicated, and yet I don't. It'll take some time to get comfortable with it, I guess. So Megan, what did you find of interest this particular week?
Well, I could talk about one of the bigger deals today, or this week, the Bayer Panasonic acquisition, which was interesting, but I don't really want to talk about that. I'll mention it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they're kind of moving on.
Bayer just decided to offload its diabetes unit. They have a bunch of diabetes, glucose monitors that they are selling to Panasonic. It's sort of interesting that in the U.S., things like continuous glucose monitors and next-gen just diabetes monitoring technology is starting to get to the point where some of these more traditional diabetes tools are getting outdated. So instead of evolving with it, Bayer which is based in Germany, but they're scaling back to focus on small molecule drugs, things like prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs, as opposed to doing a device like a diabetes monitor. And they're selling it to Panasonic, which is going to try and apply it to the Asian market because in China, especially, I think it says 1/3 of the world's diabetics are in China, which is a really huge number. Not all of them can afford and not all of them can afford next-gen technology. So a standard diabetes monitor still has a really good, market penetration in a place like Asia or India or something like that, So the international play for effective but dated technologies is still there. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But I wanted to talk about a little profile I wrote this week just because I think it's an interesting technology.
Wow, that's what you were being asked to do.
What's that?
That's what you were asking. What do you think was particularly interesting this week?
Exactly. But the Panasonic thing is interesting, too. It's a startup that it took some NYU technology to objectively measure pain. And I happen to know a lot of hypochondriacs in my life, and sometimes I'm wondering, is your head really hurting as bad as you think it is right now? So this technology that they have is an EEG device that you put on your head, and then it'll measure the brain waves, and then the data output, which they can show just on they show similar work on fMRIs and things like that. So they've calibrated how it's supposed how basically how the pain signals show up in the brain. It's called a pain matrix, in the way that the brain is reacting to bodily pain or mental pain or whatever. So anyway, the current standard of care is to have a scale of 1 to 10, and someone just points to a frowny face saying, my pain is like that level of frowny face on a scale of 1 to 10. It's extremely subjective. It's not really useful, and it's completely useless if you're dealing with young children and you're dealing with,
Yeah, I was going to say, I was wondering, is this more for adults or for young children?
Yeah, well, one of the better applications to allow this to become a standard of care, if they succeed in their plan, would be to use it in pediatric patients. The CEO actually had a situation where his daughter cracked her head open, and they didn't know it because she was crying, but all kids cry when they hit their head, and they didn't find out until much, much later. And if they had known objectively how much pain she was in, they would have taken her to the ER instead of just, patted her on the head, which probably made it hurt worse. But but yeah, it could also be used in sorry. But yeah, it could be used in nursing homes. It could be used in the hypochondriacs that I know. They're just I can see the
because it's so relative, right? I mean, it's so relative. People, some people, feel pain more acutely than others. Yeah. But this is an objective way of being able to bridge the gap in those kind of communications.
Absolutely, because the way that they were doing their studies, the extreme pain, the TENS kind of calibrated, everyone, if somebody got shot in the face or shot in the face, I don't know, someone had an extreme injury. Yeah, shot in the arm. Like a serious injury, the pain level would be proper, it would be accurate, just on the subjective scale. And same with if there's 0 pain. But there was a gray zone between 3 and 8 on the 1 to 10 scale where it was just, it just depended person to person. So when it comes to opioid management or pain drug just administration, I could see a use case for this. It's an interesting technology. So
definitely.
Yeah, so
All right, well,
PainQX, cool company.
Sure. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our broadcast. I know so we've just like looking ahead to next week. Meghna, you and I are going to be gracing the International Bio Conference with our presence, and hopefully checking out some very interesting panel discussions and innovations that are going to be presented there. But Neil, you've got a conference yourself, right?
Yeah, it's here in Chicago. HIMSS is hosting the National Healthcare Innovation Summit, and it's nowhere near as large as the annual HIMSS conference. It's just in a downtown hotel, but it seems like there ought to be some interesting things coming out of it. So stay tuned for my coverage.
Okay, great.
And
well, with
ours as
that,
well.
And ours, exactly. All right, well, with that, we at MedCity News would like to bid you guys a great weekend from Stephanie Baum, Meghna Keshavan, and Neil Versell. Have a great weekend, and tune into our website and MedHeads next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.